Hello, and welcome to the penultimate programme in the Total Transformation series. Over the last 8 evenings, our hope is that you will have heard something that will make a difference to your daily lives, whether it has been health-related, whether it has made you think more positively, or even has made you focus more intently on the spiritual aspects of your life. And tonight's programme is no exception, and our 3 presenters are eager to pass on some of their knowledge and experience from their professional and personal lives. So if you hear anything during the seminars that raises a question in your mind, please place it in the chat. So now, as usual, Juliet will introduce our first speaker. So over to you, Juliet.
Thank you, Leroy. This evening, once again, I'm happy to present to you our presenter she's been with us a couple of nights. Her name is Jackie Brown, and she's back again, sharing all things natural as created. Jackie has the knowledge, the skill, and experience on health matters. This knowledge she's excited to share with you so that you have the correct information at hand so that you can share it with others. This evening topic is natural remedies. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please place them in the chat. The next voice you'll hear this evening is that of Jackie Brown.
Good evening, everyone. Wonderful to see you again. We had a lot of time last night to consider what to eat after being told what not to eat, or rather what does not benefit our bodies as much. We then had a look at some possible menus that I hoped tickled your fancy. And tonight, we're going to be looking at natural remedies. What can we use in place or instead of some of our medications? However, this is not to advocate removing medications per se, and not all medications actually work alongside natural remedies. So we have to tread carefully. I'm just going to begin the presentation this evening, and we welcome questions that you may have, reservations that you may have concerning this very topic, but we hope it will be a blessing for you. If nothing else, it would be thought-provoking. We learned last week during one of the presentations what disease was and what well-being was. We learned that it was physical, mental, and spiritual, that wholeness. We learned also from this quote what disease is. There are so many myths about disease and so many uncertainties, especially in this climate of COVID. Ministry of Healing 127, which is an amazing book that really helped me on my walk, in terms of health, says like this: disease is nature's effort to free itself. Why does it need to free itself? Because it's toxic, because the toxins therefore cause inflammation. Why have these things come about? Is it because my body is just messed up? Well, all our bodies in one way or another are messed up. But the accumulation of toxins has now brought about inflammation and dis-ease. The body is not at ease. But why have I got dis-ease? Because knowingly or unknowingly, I have been violating the laws of health. What are they? They are very simple. I've been talking about them several times. They are the natural things that are available to every single person on this planet. water, exercise, sunshine. Now, we have to admit, we're not always, this commodity is not always available to us. However, where we're not getting enough, we need to supplement. We're talking about temperance, that means eating or doing anything in moderation, not in excess, because whether in playing or working or eating or sleeping, if we do too much or too little, it can be detrimental. These are actually the natural remedies because these are accessible to every single person. And then on top of this, we have the herbs and the spices, those things that enhance our healing and sometimes quicken the reactions of the body. You know that water is amazing internally for drinking. However, water used for hydrotherapy is equally amazing. You see such transformations just by doing a simple water therapy on people. How does disease work? Here you see in front of you coughing, sneezing, fever. All of these are an effort of nature to relieve itself. With a fever, the body's raising up its temperature to burn up the virus or the bacteria that has entered its sphere. With sneezing, again, the body is freeing itself through the nasal cavities. With coughing, the lungs are trying to get rid of whatever has just entered it. So these are all examples of disease because the body is not at ease, it tries to free itself. And what we usually do right here is get the calpol or the Nurofen or whatever else it is to stop the process. But the process needs to be helped as opposed to stopped. So in regards to a fever, the best thing to do for a fever is to keep the body hydrated, keep a cold flannel on the head, and simply, have someone around you, if not possible, put some music on to relax you, to keep your mind at ease. Open the window a crack for some fresh air. That way, whatever is troubling you does not incubate in that room or in that home, but there's free flowing air. But one of the most important things with a fever is keeping the head cool at all times. And since you're sweating out all the hydration in your body, you need to replenish so that you don't become dehydrated. So the cure then is in the cause. Let's get to the root cause and help the body to restore itself, because given the right opportunity, the body miraculously restores itself. That's because that's how God has made our bodies to be able to heal itself, given the right circumstances. As I mentioned previously, fresh air, exercise, pure water, and clean, sweet premises. This is one of the laws of health. Cleanliness is very important. Of course, we've realized its importance even more so the past few months with the amount of times we have to wash our hands and how we're told what we're told to use. And before you enter a store, what you have to do. And before you exit a store, now we know all about cleanliness if we never did before, right? But cleanliness is very important because it helps disease not to continue to contaminate where possible. This is within reach of everyone. But drugs are expensive, especially if we do not have a country. You're not in a country where you have free drugs. Most people have to pay for it around the world. But they're not just expensive in terms of how much you have to pay, but the side effects oftentimes are devastating. And so God's plan, this is the foundation of all health. And oftentimes we don't want to drink water. We don't want to rest. We've got too much to do. And you know what? I don't always feel like eating my greens. Nonetheless, this is the foundation of health. And God helps each and every one of us on this path to restoration, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Food is our best medicine. We have to eat. There's no way that we can refrain from eating. Whether we choose to eat plant-based or not, we have to eat. However, what we choose to eat is very important. Whatever we eat becomes part of our blood. And so whatever the blood feeds every single part of your body. And if the blood becomes toxic, the body cannot stand. And so food, we discovered yesterday, plant-based food can be exciting, nutritious, and delicious, and it can look amazing. And it just takes a little bit of just someone showing you a few recipes, and you're off. On top of that, God has given us wonderful things in nature that can help us to prevent and recover from dis-ease. This is a fantastic one for all the families called blackstrap molasses. Make sure it says blackstrap. It's fantastic for anemia, menopause, skin care, warts, sinus problems, cancer, and tumor growth. Now, some people may think, well, it's a bit sweet, isn't it? The sweetness is actually, it's more nutritious than it is sweet. It's packed full of potassium, magnesium, manganese, selenium even. So for example, even those whom we have come across with who are suffering with diabetes, in small doses can have blackstrap molasses to help build their iron and also to use in their cereals. Blackstrap molasses, by the way, before I move on quickly, is also excellent for a facial. Apply liberally on your face, leave it for about 45 minutes, and wash it off, and you'll have beautifully smooth, silky skin. You have charcoal. I would recommend that everybody get charcoal into their cupboards because this is fantastic. Charcoal has the ability, especially activated charcoal, has the ability of going into the body and absorbing toxins. So if there's poisoning or somebody has a tummy bug, just put a teaspoon or even less into a glass, add water, and drink it. Don't forget to drink some more water thereafter to help the body to go in and incubate or isolate the poison and help it to get out of the body safely, leaving you well again. So activated charcoal is a fantastic natural remedy. It's also good for bruises and inflammation, for stomach conditions, for gas, bad breath, diarrhea, insect bites. You can make a little paste with a bit of water, if you have an insect bite, and apply it to the area. And it will, again, draw out the toxins or the poisons from the bite. Liver conditions, toothache. I'll show you a recipe for toothache that involves charcoal in a moment. But this is just a wonderful, wonderful introduction to your medicine cabinet. Be careful if you're going to have it during the day, whether as a drink or otherwise, that you have it 2 hours before or 2 hours after a meal. Otherwise, it will absorb all the nutrients as well. This is the toothache recipe I was referring to. 1 teaspoon of charcoal powder, 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, a drop of peppermint essential oil, and if you want, maybe a drop of pure water as well. And sometimes you can just mix it and apply it directly to the cavity or wherever the pain is, or put it on a gauze and hold it to the area of pain. Aloe vera, everybody knows about aloe vera, and if you don't, you're about to learn that it's anti-inflammatory, it's antibacterial, it's antiviral. It aids digestion and liver function, that should say, encourages elimination and healing, and strengthens the immune system. It also helps with autoimmune functions as well. So it's you know, if you see it in the likes of Aldi or in the gardening stores, please pick one up. It is also a fantastic plant for absorbing toxins in the home. So it's a plant that you know, every home should really have. Aloe vera is fantastic for healing the gut. If you have gastritis or any other gastrointestinal problems, aloe vera juice is very good for healing, and also acid reflux. Cabbage, it's good for AIDS, for anemia, for arthritis. In terms of arthritis, if you get a green cabbage and take the leaf off and beat it, just roll a rolling pin over it, or beat it with a rolling pin, you know, vent some of that stress that we are all under, and so that it's broken down. Apply it to the area. It might be your knees, it might be your ankles, it might even be your wrists, and cling film it and just leave it there. Cabbage has the ability to absorb the inflammation from those joints. Also, if you have edema, which is swelling of the feet and sometimes the hands, that it can be also very healing for swelling as well. For burns, for cancer, for cirrhosis, for gout, ulcers, and sciatic pain, it's very, very effective. Garlic used to help control cholesterol, hypertension, blood clots, blood sugar, inflammation. Had a young girl who has pulmonary embolism, and garlic has been fantastic. She doesn't like drinking it, so we had to turn her, point her attention to a garlic capsule called Allicin, ALLICIN. Fantastic for boosting the immune system, but also for controlling cholesterol and hypertension, and helping the blood run free for conditions like blood clots. Garlic strengthens the body to fight cancer as well. Garlic has amazing anti-cancer capabilities, and it inhibits tumor growth. That means it stops the tumor from growing if caught early enough. And if obviously many other harmful things are removed from the life and all the good things added, it can be very powerful in terms of fighting cancer. What about an onion? What about an onion? What can we possibly do with an onion? Well, in terms of sciatic pain, whether in the knees or rather in the back or in the legs, you can actually cut an onion open and rub the onion in that area of pain. The same with arthritic pain in the knees and the other joints, you can do the same. And the sulfur content of the onion will again help with the pain relief and help with circulation. Besides that, we can make a wonderful onion cough syrup made with one onion, add a little bit of honey, and you just need a jar. If you cut the onions in thin slices and you just layer it, one layer onion, the next layer pure honey. It's better if the honey is unpasteurized. So you want just pure raw honey, and you layer it one by one until there are no more onions. You top it with the honey. You leave it in the jar for about 5 hours, and the honey will draw out all the potent nutrients from the onion, and you take a teaspoon as needed. It is delicious as well as very effective. It's another cough syrup here, the juice of 1 large lemon, 3 teaspoons of eucalyptus oil, and half a cup of honey. This would be very good for young children with this season, you know, some of us may come down with coughs and colds. This is a very easy but effective cough syrup. Lemons, we all know about the vitamin C in lemons and how beneficial they can be. As well as having lemon as lemon drink, you can also put these ingredients together to make a stop smoking urge. Or if you have sinus problems, it's very potent to overcoming these symptoms. So 3/4 cup fresh lemon juice, 1/4 cup of honey, and 1/3 of a teaspoon of peppermint oil, or just put a couple of drops. This is fantastic for taking away the urge to smoke. If you're trying to kick the habit and you're finding it difficult, this will assist you on that journey as well. Nature's flu shot. We're in flu season. Rather than getting a flu jab, try a flu shot, which is very natural. A whole bulb of garlic. Remember, we just learned that garlic is anti-everything, including antisocial. So if you're going to drink this, make sure you're not going anywhere too fast. 1 cup of fresh lemon juice, 2 teaspoons of ginger powder, 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper, 2 tablespoons of honey, 3 cups of pineapple juice. All this honey that we're talking about, it's not your local Tesco runny honey, but it's more medicinal honey. So you're looking at your raw honeys. Get what you can afford. It will work nonetheless. And just enjoy the natural remedies that God has provided. Then you might want an antibiotic, in which case nature's penicillin is more for you. 1 grapefruit, 1 orange, 2 lemons, 3 cloves of garlic, half a large onion. You might think that sounds terrible. And 3 drops of peppermint oil. Sounds terrible, but I don't remember any penicillin tasting so very nice. But this, imagine, is absolutely natural and it works. There's been so many occasions where, whether it's a bacterial infection or a fungal infection or a virus, this has been very potent against it. Recently, a lady with a huge swollen abscess in her mouth went on a course of nature's penicillin, and within 3 days was recovered. And we give all the thanks to God for that. Are you in pain? Your joints, that maybe the cabbage is not working, and you know, the onion, well, you can't go around smelling like onion all day. Try the pain salve. You can use 40 grams of shea butter, which is fantastic for allowing the salve to stay longer. 1.5 tablespoon of 90,000 heat unit cayenne pepper. However, listen, if you have cayenne pepper from Tesco or Asda or wherever, use that. It will work just as well. Half a tablespoon of ginger powder, 1/4 teaspoon of peppermint oil, 1/4 teaspoon of wintergreen oil. You might have to get this online. It's not as readily available as the other essential oils. Mix all of this together in a glass bowl or a jar and apply to the painful area. It is wonderful for alleviating pain as you get to the cause and start to drink more water and do various other things that will help to completely eradicate the pain. This is fantastic. Even now we can start drinking ginger, cayenne, turmeric on their own. We had a young girl here recently who loved turmeric latte. How do you make that? We used almond milk, put a teaspoon or 2 of turmeric, a little bit of raw honey, a little bit of cayenne, a little bit of ginger. She loved it, and it really helped with her circulation. It helped to keep her body warm. She had problems with you know, cold hands and feet. and this really helped. In this atmosphere or this situation that we're in with COVID, these drinks are fantastic, and they can ward off viruses as well as help you recover. Turmeric is fantastic for all inflammatory conditions. So whatever inflammation, whatever inflammatory conditions you may have, this is very, very powerful. Okay, mix all together. I've mentioned here in warm water with a little bit of coconut oil for better absorption, but you can use milk to have a latte. And if you have some carob powder, sprinkle a little on top for effect and taste, and you are sure to enjoy it. Aubergine for high blood pressure. Again, cutting one aubergine into pieces and put it in a glass jar. Add water and put in your fridge. Shake every day, and within 5 days, you'll have a wonderful solution that will help lower your blood pressure naturally. And remember that this is not going to just get rid of your high blood pressure. We have to work towards completely reversing blood pressure. But in the meantime, this is a wonderful natural remedy, and it can work alongside your medication, and you don't have to worry about it. Perhaps you're constipated. The seat of all disease is toxicity. So let's start to get the bowels moving more freely with this wonderful recipe for the smooth move. 1 cup of pitted prunes, 2 tablespoons of flaxseed or linseeds, 3 cups of unsweetened prune juice. Blend all this together in a beautifully sweet smoothie. But beware, don't go anywhere. Stay close to home because you will move very smoothly very soon. And if that doesn't work, there's a wonderful concoction of herbs called Swedish bitters. You don't have to mix it yourself. If you go on Amazon, you can obtain Swedish bitters, make a tea out of it. And if the smooth move didn't work, the Swedish bitters surely will. There's so much to share. And I think I'll pause right here and give you some time to ask me questions. But health is a treasure. Let's take care of ourselves in these months of winter. I hope that was helpful. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Jackie. Yes, we've got a few questions. All these remedies, just wanting to know, are they old wives' tale? Do they really work?
Yes. I say taste and see that the Lord is good. There are some remedies whereby if you use them in a way that you expect medications to work, then you may consider them an old wives' tale because they don't often work just like that. For example, if I have a headache, I may take a paracetamol and expect it to work within 15 minutes. With natural remedies, it may take just slightly longer. But with the natural remedies, you have to be persistent and you have to be consistent. And it does pay off, and it has no side effects whatsoever. And so they're not old wives' tale. I think you just need to be, like I said, persistent and consistent, and remove whatever could be causing the problem. If dehydration is the problem for my headache, I can take all the natural remedies I want. It will keep reoccurring. I need to drink more water.
Thank you. That's the only question I've got for you this evening. It's been very informative. As I said earlier, if anyone's got any other questions, please place them in the chat, and then we'll hopefully answer them before by the time we do our final seminar. So thank you once again, Jackie. Thank you.
Wonderful. Have a good evening. God bless
and you too.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Jackie and Juliet. As continuing our session this evening, our next session is the mental health section, and I'm delighted to welcome back Dr. Magna Pax, who has been with us last week and the first 2 days of this week. Yesterday, we had Dr. Jao, who covered anxiety. And then today we are back with Dr. Pax. And Dr. Pax is a licensed psychologist, very experienced in this field. And today's topic is, do you have hope? Do you have hope? If you have questions, just put them in the chat, and then Dr. Pax will answer them at the end. So it's up. The next voice you hear is Dr. Pax now. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. It's good to be with you again. If you can notice, my environment is different. I have on a headpiece because I don't want you to hear the cars. I have a family member in the hospital, and that's why I had to reschedule for today. And I have to do this Zoom from the car. So I apologize for the crude setting, but I hope that you can hear me well and see me well. And it's good to be back with you. This is my last opportunity. And so we're going to be talking about hope. I mentioned earlier in one of my presentations that there's a newer field of psychology called positive psychology. And this field came about because there were psychologists who were tired of always looking at the abnormalities and not looking at the strengths and the virtues that human beings have, and then teaching them ways to encourage and develop those characteristics. And so today we want to talk about hope. There's a lot of research out on hope, and I hope that you will gain something from this talk of hope. Let's look at some things. What exactly is hope? Hope is to expect with confidence and to cherish a desire with anticipation. To expect with confidence and to cherish a desire with anticipation. Hope is important in life. More and more research is showing that many people are hopeless. This pandemic didn't help with that situation because people were quarantined. They were afraid because this new disease came about that people didn't know much about. People are getting sick, they're losing loved ones. So a lot are losing hope. And hope is so important for good mental health, spiritual health. And so I wanted to share some of the information out there about hope. You know, there's something called deaths of despair. Deaths of despair. These are deaths that come about either by suicide or by overdosing. And these deaths, as you can tell from the name, despair, people usually resort to them or resort to the intention to die because they're in such despair. Sometimes we think suicide occurs only because people are depressed, but sometimes people may not be mentally or clinically described as depressed. I'm sorry if this is moving about. I'm trying to balance this on my knee in my car. But sometimes people are just hopeless and not necessarily clinically depressed, and that can lead them to deaths of despair, such as overdoses, opioid overuse, and just actually planned suicide. So it's important for people to have hope. And so we want to talk about that. There's a psychologist who says that there's three aspects of hope, three components. One is a goal. You want to have a goal that will provide you direction and an endpoint. And then we want an agency. We want to have the ability to shape our lives, the belief that we can make things happen, and the motivation to reach a desired outcome. That's important. In order to have hope, you have to have a belief that you can do things to change your life. And then pathways, how we get there. So 3 components of hope, according to Dr. Charles Snyder, is the goal. What is the goal you want to reach? What's the direction? How are you going to reach it? Agency is feeling that you have the ability to do that. And then pathways, how are you going to get there? All right, so let's look at some of the research in terms of the positive outcomes related to hope. There's been research done on this. For example, in the area of academics, there was a 6-year longitudinal study, and it found that students at the very start of school, hope predicted their GPA and their graduation rates. So students who had hopeful outlooks when they started their schooling, they had better GPAs and they were more likely to graduate. So starting school and saying, I believe and I have hope that I'm going to do well and I'm going to graduate, that can do a lot for students. Another research study related to academics is they did a 3-year study and they found that hope predicted academic achievement better than intelligence or even personality, meaning how responsible a person is or how conscientious that person is. And so how hopeful you are can determine how well you do in school. If you believe that you have an endpoint, I want to do well, if you believe that you have the ability, if you believe that you have the pathway to do so, remember those 3 components of hope, people do better in school, better than even being very intelligent. Sometimes people drop out of school, people drop out of projects because they don't have any hope that they're going to achieve. And so it's important at a young age that we instill hope in our young people. I was just in a store recently and I heard a mother screaming at the child. And I thought to myself, what hope does that bring to that child? Sometimes children have problems because the parents don't do anything to bring hope. They call them names, they discourage them. And we could also do that with each other. We have to be ever careful with that. There's also been research done with hope and physical health. People who are hopeful, they tend to read and retain and use health-related information. And they also engage in more preventive behavior. So those who are listening now, developing hope is going to help you to retain this information more, all the wonderful information you've heard from the various health speakers. If you're a hopeful person, you're going to retain it more and you're going to be more likely to put it into practice because you're going to believe, this person just talked about garlic, just talked about lemon. I believe that this will make a difference. I'm hopeful that this will make a difference. And if you have that perspective, you're more likely to implement what you're hearing. The other thing they found with hope is that it helps with interpersonal relationships. People who are hopeful, they have more positive moods, they have more positive thoughts, they cope better with stress, and they face challenges head on rather than avoiding. So having hope can also help with that. And I wanted to go back to the physical health. It also shows that people who have hope or are hopeful, they adjust better to chronic illness, to disabilities, and to injury. And then, of course, psychological adjustment, we mentioned that already. I didn't give the information on the interpersonal relationships, but hopeful people report more social support. They're not very lonely and they call more on their social support. So developing hope can be helpful in many ways. So you might be wondering, how does this apply to me if I'm not hopeful? Well, the thing that I like about these things in positive psychology is that the researchers show that there are certain things we can do. They study people who have high scores in these areas. We talked about happiness last week, and they pull out different characteristics that can be helpful. And so they've studied people who are hopeful, and they found certain characteristics that I want to share with you. One of the things is hopeful people have a clear strategy. They have a plan to achieve goals, and they figure out, this is what I'm going to do. You can hope for something, but if you don't have a clear strategy, it's not going to get you very far. So those students we talked about in school, they have a clear strategy. I'm going to study 3 hours a day. I'm going to study this amount of time. And this is my strategy to be able to do well in school. You wanted to learn a skill. I'm going to put this amount of time into this skill. And hopeful people, they have a strategy of how they're going to achieve what they want to do. Hopeful people are also motivated. They have the initiative to implement their plans. They believe that they can carry out their plans, and they put forth that effort. That's important, to have motivation. So many people are lacking in motivation. I work with people who lack motivation, and it's not easy to work with people like that. But if you help them to be able to recognize there are some things that they can do, helping them look at some of the things they have achieved in life, and how when they put forth effort, things were done, it can help them with that. And it can also be helpful for hope. Hopeful people have person power. They believe they can carry out, similar to the motivation, they believe that they can carry out what they're doing. And they also are able to stay focused. They don't give in the face of temptation. They don't give in to their impulses. The impulse may be when you have to do something, oh, I'm just going to go out, or I'm going to sleep, or I'm going to do something else. They don't get distracted. Hopeful people, they are able to control their impulses. The other thing about hopeful people is they take care of themselves. That's so important, especially when they're stressed. Hopeful people know how to stick to a healthy lifestyle, getting proper sleep, getting proper diet, eating properly, exercising, and they're able to put these things forward and take care of themselves. You know, you're wondering, maybe you're wondering, how am I going to do this? Well, I want to answer that question even now. As I'm sharing this, there's probably an area that you can pick up and see where you are lacking in. And so I want to encourage you to see what you can do to start to just make one little step to be able to develop more hope. Maybe you can do some of these things we've talked about. There's also something called grit. Dr. Angela Duckworth is a psychology, and she's come up with this term. Grit is not being able to stick with long-term goals and have passion and perseverance. You not only bounce back when you have difficulties, we talked about resilience, but you have passion and you have perseverance and you develop that grit. She actually studied, I don't know if you've heard of the West Point Naval Academy here in America. A lot of military people go there. And she found that many people end up not finishing that academy because they don't have grit. They give up easily. If you're one of those kind of person, I apologize if you hear this noise out here. It's the traffic because I'm in my car. But if you're one of these people who give up easily, just starting to make changes and saying, I'm going to stick to that. Since I learned about grit, when I do things, even in opening a jar, you know, I might tend to say, honey, can you do this to my husband? But now I think about the whole thing of grit and I keep working at it until I could get that jar open. Sometimes we give up much too easily. Things come our way, we're pursuing a goal and we run across a roadblock and we say, I can't do this. But I want to encourage you to have grit. Hopeful people have grit. Continue to try, don't give up. Another thing that hopeful people have is a growth mindset. I don't know how many of you all have heard of the growth mindset, but a growth mindset is one where you believe that effort is the key to your success versus feeling that talent is the key to success, which is a fixed mindset. Many people think that others do well in life because they're so talented, and some of that might be true. But some of the famous people in the world who do well, it's not only talent, it's talent and or maybe not talent, but it's that they put forth effort. Even people with talent, for them to do well, they have to put forth effort, or else they may not be able to do as well in the long run. Some of you may be into sports. I'm not into it as much as I used to be, but there's a player that many people along the world have heard of. It is Michael Jordan. People think Michael Jordan was so successful because he was talented, but what they found was that, excuse me for a moment, I'm going to do something here to maybe reduce some of this noise. What they found is that Michael Jordan practiced a lot. It wasn't that it all came naturally. He tells people, don't think this comes naturally. I practiced for hours. And so growth mindset people, they may not see that they have a talent, but if there's something they want to do and they really believe they're called to do it, they will put forth effort and they practice a lot. I want to just share some differences between the two for you so you'll see. A fixed mindset person, they avoid challenge. Anything that's challenging, they stay away from it. Whereas a growth mindset person, they will embrace challenge. They look at something as challenging and they say, wow, this is great. I'm going to embrace it and I'm going to see what I'm going to do. But a fixed mindset person, that's the person that thinks that everything's come as a result of talent, of talent and not effort. They'll give up easily or they'll avoid challenge. And I gave the next one, and that is fixed mindset people give up easily, whereas a growth mindset person, they persist even with obstacles. The fixed mindset person, they see effort as fruitless. The growth mindset person, they look at efforts as necessary. And then one more, there are many more, but the fixed mindset person, they're threatened by others' achievements. Growth mindset person, they are inspired by others' success. So there's a difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. Again, let me repeat that. The growth mindset person believes that they can put forth effort to succeed. The fixed mindset person thinks that it's just due to talent. And you want to have a growth mindset when you approach things, and hopeful people tend to have that growth mindset. The other thing I like about hope is that it actually does something in your brain. When you anticipate something, which is what hope involves, if you remember me giving you that definition, when you anticipate something will change or you receive a reward, it actually activates a part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens. This has a role in the reward circuit of the brain, and just hoping for something actually brings pleasure. So it's amazing how when we have hope, it activates that part of the brain and you feel dopamine because the dopamine is projected to that part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, and you experience pleasure. You've heard of dopamine. You experience dopamine when you do pleasurable things. So when you have hope, it actually does something to your brain. The other thing that it does to the brain is there's a part of the brain known as the amygdala. And this is the part of the brain that reacts to negative experiences. When you feel hopeful, it actually desensitizes the part of that brain that experiences negative things. And so when you feel hopeful, that amygdala is less sensitive to negative experiences. So when you're hopeful and you encounter something negative, in spite of that negative experience, the amygdala and the brain won't respond as strongly, and you'll experience more hope. You'll experience more positive or less negative. That's a better way to put it. You'll experience less negative emotions like anxiety or fright or anger when you feel hope. So it also changes that brain. And if you've heard anything about neuroplasticity, and that is the brain can be changed. It's not just the same all the time. It can be changed actually from experiences. So hope can actually change your brain. So we want to try to experience hope, and just some things I want to leave with you to help you to experience more hope. And that is, you want to fight disabling thoughts. When the thoughts come to your mind, stop yourself. If you find yourself thinking a lot about, oh, I don't know if this is going to work out, this is hopeless, stop. Actually say to yourself, stop, and start to think about what it is I can do to have better thoughts about this. It takes practice to do this, but I want to encourage you to do that. If you notice, several times I've mentioned this thing about thoughts, in my thing about depression, in my talk about stress, in my talk about moving past the past, all of them, even in happiness, being able to manage your thoughts will do wonders. And when I work with people, I work a lot with helping them manage their thoughts. So you want to fight disabling thoughts. Don't allow yourself to ruminate about all the negative things. When you find yourself doing that, as I said earlier, stop and see what you can do to change that mindset. Another thing to develop hope, you want to set clear, achievable goals. Don't just set broad general goals. You want to have clear goals. Let's say you want to learn a skill. You want to say to yourself, what's the next step I can take to learn this skill? Who can I call? Where can I enroll in school? What can I do? How much should I practice? You want to set clear, achievable goals, and you want to give yourself a time frame. Within this month, I want to master this particular step of this skill. There's something called SMART. I don't remember all of the part of the acronym, but it's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, I think, time frame. And that's important when you're setting goals. So you want to do that. I mentioned earlier, develop a growth mindset. Start to look at things more based on effort than on just talent. Don't just give up because you say, I wasn't born with that talent. If there's something you feel you are called to, put forth effort to do better. You want to cope successfully with failure. Thomas Edison said, I didn't fail 10,000 times before I developed the light bulb. I'm kind of paraphrasing it. I tried 10,000 times. He had a hopeful outlook. People who succeed, they always have failure. They are able to move forward though, because they cope well with the failure. Failure will come in life. Don't get discouraged. I'm learning a Bible verse, if you don't mind me saying that. It says, a just man falleth 7 times, but he riseth again. So when you fall, I'm saying learning, I'm memorizing it. When you fall, you want to be able to get back up. Don't allow failure to put you down where you don't get up again, okay? Okay, think about your strengths too. Focus on your strengths. Many people focus too much on, I can't do this. I don't do this well. But God has given each one of us here strengths. So it's important to not focus on what you can't do, but to focus on what you can do. So let me repeat those 5 things again if you want to start developing hope. Fight disabling thoughts, set clear, achievable goals, develop a growth mindset, cope successfully with failure, and focus on your strengths. This may be overwhelming if you're a hopeless person, but I want to encourage you to put some effort into developing hope. It's a skill that I believe every one of us can develop, just like happiness. And the goal is for you to put forth that effort and to say, this is what I'm going to do. Now, if you're depressed, you may need some help with being able to develop hope, but you can do it. And I can't end, because I believe in God, I can't end without talking about that if you are a Christian, there is a lot of hope that you can have in God. Hope in God can bring happiness. Hope in God can bring health. In Psalms 43:5, it says, "Why art thou cast down, O my soul? And why art thou disquieted within me?" Hope in God. When those times come when you are down and you're feeling discouraged and in despair, hoping in God can lift your spirits. He has so many promises in the Bible that can help us. He tells us, "Happy is he that hath the God of Jacob for his help, whose hope is in the Lord his God." There are many Bible verses that can give us hope. And I want you to be able to find a verse in the Bible, if you believe in the Bible, that can bring you hope. It's amazing how there are times I have felt hopeless because of things going on in my life. And I've found a promise in the Bible that has given me hope in spite of what's going on. I want to share one of those with you. One of those says, "I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end." I remember going through a terrible time with losing my first husband. I sank into a little bit of hopelessness then, but I was able to grab on to that promise and other promises and believe that God had a plan for my life, even though I felt a little hopeless. And repeating that verse over and over again did wonders for me in terms of being able to develop hope. And maybe you can find something in the Bible that you can use. Write it on a card and you can read it during those times when you're hopeless or feeling lack of hope. And hope can also help with health. And one person says that courage, hope, faith, sympathy, love, they promote health and they prolong life. And you know what? I also want to encourage you. Don't only look to develop hope in your life. Look to see how you can help others be hopeful. Sometimes, but not all the times, when I work with my clients and I start with them or towards the middle of working with them, I say to them, how much hope do you have that you can conquer this particular issue or that you can get over this? Some of them give me some low numbers and I explore them with them and try to find out, what's the reason that you're feeling hopeless? Others tell me, I'm very hopeful that I can get over this particular situation or deal with this difficulty. And you know, the ones who tell me that they're hopeful, they do much better. So I want to encourage you to inspire hope within others. Some are dealing with hopelessness. It may be your child. It may be a friend. It may be a neighbor. See what you can do, as one writer says in the book Ministry of Healing, to bring back sunlight to them. Speak to them. Pray with them. Encourage them. I want you to not only think about hope for yourself, but I want you to think about giving hope to others. In this time that we're living right now, during this pandemic, many are hopeless. And if you are one of those, I want to encourage you to think about some of the things I've shared. I understand that on YouTube or on the website for the church that's promoting this, I'm blanking at the name of the church right now, but I'm sure you can find out. You can go back and look at this and other of the top seminars again and see what you can do to become happier, healthier, and more hopeful. That's what I'm hoping for each one of you today. And it was a pleasure being with you during this time, even though this was a little noisy. I don't know if you heard the cars, but I'm glad I was able to do so. And so I'm hoping that you will feel more hopeful and that you will do things to build hope in yourself, and inspire hope with others. And I'll leave now. I don't know if there's many questions. If not, I guess we can end a little early, but we'll see if there are any questions for me to answer. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you, Dr. Parks. That was very, very good talk on hope. There are not many questions yet, but someone's put in a comment to say that this has been a very encouraging session, and they've liked the steps which you've outlined about
I'm
hope.
glad to hear that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just got one question. You talked about some people having a fixed mindset. What sort of strategies do you use if you find someone with a fixed mindset and you want to try to help them in a positive way?
What I try to do is ask them to look at the things that they do well. It's good to help them to go back and see the things they've achieved in life, and to see that it's through effort that they were able to achieve that, because you want to give them, we're talking about hope. So most everyone has achieved in life. They may not be able to think about it at this particular time, at the time that they're feeling the fixed mindset. But if they go back and think to whatever skill they have learned, and think about the fact that they learned this skill by putting forth effort. So my point is helping them to look at their successes from the past, and helping them to see, you succeeded back then, you were able to do this then. Take that same mindset and put it to this. And then also help them to start to identify some of the thoughts they have. Some people with that fixed mindset, they put themselves down a lot. They compare themselves to people and they put themselves down, but helping them to recognize their strengths, that there are some things they can do well, and starting to spend more time thinking about that and less time thinking about the things they don't do well, can put them on that path of developing more of a growth mindset. It's not easy to work with people like that, but it is possible to change that mindset.
Okay, thank you very much. Just another question. You talked before about positive psychology. So do you think the early upbringing and the environment and the family members and everything in your early development has got a lot of things to do with the positive psychology, or whether it's something you can unlearn if you had a negative experience before?
Very good question. The thing about positive psychology is that they believe that people can do well in life in spite of the background that they have. In fact, there's an area of positive psychology called post-traumatic growth, which says that people can rise above adversities. So yes, people with a traumatic or problematic background, it will be more challenging. But positive psychologists say that these are all skills that can be used. And even if you have a traumatic or hard background, you can still develop some of these skills. It doesn't prevent you. It may be harder, but it doesn't prevent you. And that's what I like about positive psychology. It looks at what skills you can develop in spite of your background. But you have to put forth that effort to do that, and not just sit and say, I've had this background, there's nothing you can do. You can look forward to saying, I can learn these skills and be a better person. So the background does not prevent you from developing the characteristics reinforced by positive psychology.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for all the sessions you've provided to us. And I, for one, have learned a few things, and I would certainly go back and watch some of the videos on the channel. Thank you very much. May God bless you.
You too.
Thank you.
Pleasant good night, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to present our philosophical question and also chair the discussion tonight, and to basically look into our subject tonight. I'll give you the questions that we're gonna look at for this segment tonight. It will be Neville Taylor. Neville Taylor, just to give you a bit of background about Neville Taylor, he's a former teacher. He's a former science teacher. he's a married man. He's a married man, happily married. He basically emphasized that he's happily married. He has three children, and one thing he missed out from his from Mike, the conversation I had with him, that he's humble. He's very humble, and I have no doubt with his humility will bring some context to this question tonight. The question that we're going to look at, it's one that I would have been faced with personally in my life, being questioned by many people. And one of my friends are here tonight, basically, who would have questioned this, questioned me on this topic. And it's how, if God is such a loving God, could he tell the Israelites to go and totally wipe out an entire nation of people, even the innocent people and animals? Now look, he even posed to me, he also said that God showed favor towards the Israelites in doing so, in which something even Christians are not supposed to do. That's his views. I tried to explain to him, but I failed. I tried, but I failed. He couldn't understand how people was trying to protect themselves from being polluted by the world could then justify killing people as a means to do so, especially from a directive, from a directive from God. Welcome, Neville.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm fine, thank you, by the grace of God. And you?
Good. I know that we're going to shed some light on this burning issue tonight, right? But before we go into that question, I just want you to shed some light on the characteristics of God, his love. Can you just shed some light on that for us?
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to do that, thank you. Let me first start by saying that God is someone who has characteristics that are outside of our own characteristics. Nevertheless, we understand that God made us in his own image. And so God is a God of love. We can read it several places in the Bible where it talks about this. For example, in the Psalms, we can read that, God is gracious, he's compassionate, he's a God of love, he's good to all, he has compassion on all that he has made. And also, not only is he a compassionate and a gracious God, but he's slow to anger and is faithful. And I want to stress his love and his faithfulness.
Yeah.
And he says in Exodus chapter 34, verse 67, that he maintains, as it were, his faithfulness and love to 1,000 generations, and he delights in forgiving wickedness and rebellion. So the God of the Bible, the Judeo-Christian God, is a God whose essential characteristic is that he's a God of love, and that motivates everything, or that is at the heart of everything that he does. We might also add that some of the characteristics of God that he doesn't share with us is that he's omnipresent. He has the ability to be everywhere at the same time, and that's awesome, because whatever our needs are, wherever we are, he's with us there. Not only is he omnipresent, but he's also omnipotent. That is all powerful and he can do everything.
Right.
He's also omniscient as well, therefore he's got total and complete knowledge.
Let's get a bit real here, right? People becoming confused as to whether God's love for humanity, is it genuine or is it consistent? Because when you look, the friend that I referred to, who's here with us, he basically is of the view that the God that you just spoke about is being shown, is being characterized as an aggressive God in the Old Testament. But then in the New Testament, we have a loving God. Can you shed some light on that? Because I struggle to explain something like that to him.
Thank you. That's very interesting, because yes, indeed. And I suppose that because of, oftentimes in the Old Testament, we read about the people of God, the Israelites, how they are going into battles and they're killing people and so forth. And so some people are tempted to think, well, where's the love of God in all of this? But I think this is due to a misunderstanding of God and his nature and what he was doing through his people. So going back to his question, are some people actually confused about God and his action in the past, so to say? Is he genuinely, concerned about us? I would say that it is. And a key text really is Isaiah 53, which talks about, God or the coming Messiah, and that he would give his life to save humanity. So does God care about humanity? Well, yes, because I think one of the things that we've have to consider is this, is that we speak and we say certain things, but actually it's our actions that actually tells whether or not what we're saying is true. So we see this picture of a loving God in the Old Testament, the God who created everyone, of course, and everything. And therefore he has a concern for his created beings. And because he's a God of love, we can reflect that when Adam and Eve were tested as to see whether they would be obedient to God or not, they failed this simple test, and God stepped in order to enable them to have a second chance.
Right.
So if God was the God of love, if he didn't care for humanity, then would he have given us a second chance?
Yes. And importantly, remember up top, you describe a loving God and you justify it. If God is so loving, compassionate, and slow to anger, why did Israel put the sword to the women, the children in the Old Testament? Isn't that cruel?
That is a very good question, because of course we read the narrative, don't we? And we see where this has happened on a number, shall we say, of occasions. And I think now people looking on and reading that kind of narrative, it's quite easy for them to say, okay, well, those instances show God to be a God not of justice, not of love, but a vengeful or a vindictive God. And one might consider, or some may have considered, that one of the reasons why God acts in the way that you describe, in terms of asking his people to destroy nations, women and children, they find that to be cruel. But is that cruelty per se, or is this God reluctantly carrying out or administering his justice? After all, we must consider that every country, every nation, everywhere you go in this world, the governments, they have their laws, and the citizens of those countries know what the expectations are in terms of their behavior or their compliance. And so let me give you an example. If I go and rob a bank, then I know beforehand that the consequence might well be that I will be sent to prison. Now, in some countries, if I kill somebody, then the consequence of that murder would be that I would be definitely arrested, stand before a judge, and then sentence will be passed on me. And in some countries, the penalty could be death. Likewise, God also have his laws to regulate his government, and God government, I personally believe, encompasses this world as well. And so he has a duty to the creatures that he has created. And so his laws are there for protection. And when these laws are transgressed, although God is patient with all of us, and is a forgiving God and a loving God, a God of mercy, of grace, there comes a time inevitably when God has to act. So for example, let's say now that there's a particular nation who God is dealing with in terms of encouraging to follow the right path, to do the right deed, so to speak. And then they know what God's will is, but they choose to go against it. And so they're committing atrocities upon atrocities. Then at some point in time, God needs to step in, because he has a responsibility to all the beings, the creatures that he's created. And therefore, because although he's a God of love, sometimes I'm saying that just to say, love, stand back, it's my time to act, if that makes sense, because God is responsible to all of us, to everyone and everything that is created.
Back to my friend here, another question that he would have posed to us is like, he's of the view that God does not directly intend evil, but does he permit it? In that sense, does he permit evil?
There is a mindset, that everything that happens is God's responsibility. And that is to say, God may not directly cause evil to happen. It doesn't, because of God of love, but evil happens. Why does evil take place? Why does people do wicked things? We talk about murdering somebody. We're talking about robbing a bank. We can talk about committing adultery. In fact, if we look at God's law, the 10 Commandments, the first 4 of them talks about our relationship to a loving God, but the other 6 talks about our relationship with our fellow men. So there is, God called us to love him, but also to love our fellow men. But one could say really that, these 2 aspects make us balanced people in terms of we love God and we love our fellow men. That's what that is what God's expectation is. So the thing is simply this, and I'm sorry, I'm straying from your question. Can you repeat that again, please, your question?
Basically, he's of the view that God does not directly intend evil, but he's asking the Christian, does he permit evil?
Yes. Okay. So he does permit evil. I mean, there are 2 cases we could turn to in the Old Testament. The one, of course, I think most people are aware, of the creation of of the world and Adam and Eve, and how that God gave them the simple test, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, some people might say, well, why give them that test? But God was trying to establish their loyalty to him. And so they failed the test that God had given them to do. But we see that God permitted them to exercise their own freedom of choice. So when God creates intelligent beings, he gives them the freedom of choice. But he did not, as we notice in the narrative in Genesis, he did not step in and prevent Adam and Eve from transgressing his commandments. They had freedom of choice, and they exercised that freedom of choice, albeit in a negative manner. Now, going back to the love of God, God could have said, okay, I ask you, I implore you I just gave you a simple test and you failed it. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. He could have said that, but look how loving God is. He steps in and said, look, I'll give you another chance. But sometimes we fail to realize or consider what that choice cost. It cost God his very life, because the Bible says without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness for sin. So the question is, whose blood then could have been shed to bring Adam and Eve back into a good relationship with God, a saving relationship with God? And by Adam and Eve, I'm extending that to all of us, really, because all of us have sinned and come short, as it were, of the glory of God. So we see from that particular narrative how God gave Adam and Eve, all of us, freedom of choice, but when they chose to exercise it against his will, he didn't step in. He could have, but he didn't. Now, the other instance in the Old Testament narrative is, of course, the story of Job, as to how, there was this righteous man, if I could paraphrase, we can find that in the first few chapters of the book of Job, how that, he was righteous and holy and just and good, doing everything that God wanted him to do. And yet he was accused before God by Satan. God said, this, have you seen my servant Job? My righteous servant Job, and he said, Satan said, yes, but he was worshiping you because of all the riches, as it were, that you're giving him. And then Satan said, but put forth your hand and touch him, and he will, you'll see what he's really made of. So God did not cause Satan to commit those sins or those wickedness against Job and his family, but he permitted it.
Let's dive deeper now.
Okay, sure.
Let's bring it home, right? Billions of people are asking for peace around the world, but why hasn't God granted peace when this is something that's needed? Can you just shed some light on that?
It's an excellent question, I'd say, because we know that God is love, and he's got our best interest at heart. And although all of us, I'm sure, are crying out for peace, to be upon this earth, throughout all this world, we long for that, and we see certain atrocities that is taking place in the world. We can talk about genocide, and all kind of things, all kind of wickedness are happening, and we cry out sometimes to God, why? the fact is that God is too wise to make an error. God knows when he will bring full peace into this world. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's the will of God that we should have peace right here and now. It is. God would love to bring peace to everybody on this earth. Now, let me say that I know that the question is about why millions of people are asking for peace around the world, but why isn't God granted peace when it is something needed? I would say that there are many people in this world who have peace in their hearts. I would say that there are many people who recognize God from who he is, and they are also calling out for peace in this world per se, as it were, for the kingdom of God to be in this world, in terms of the second coming of Christ. But they are still enjoying a certain degree of peace and freedom in this world. So we know that God in his time will bring complete peace to this world, but God alone knows when that time is right and ready. And may I say too that, this question has arisen in the past, and Paul said that God is not slack concerning his promise, but he is long suffering, and his desire is that he wants everybody to be saved. So you might consider that God is giving this world extended probationary time, and by that time being given us opportunities to accept him in our lives, just as he did with the Canaanites and so forth, so that we might have time to make our life right with him.
Right. I hear you on that one. But is there an option for an inclusive concept of God who loves everybody unconditionally? It takes us back to that question: if God is so loving, compassionate, and slow to anger, why did Israel put to the sword? It takes us back to there. So is there an option for an inclusive concept of God who loves everybody unconditionally?
I do believe that God loves everybody unconditionally. And let me say this, because of his very nature of who he is, at the core of his being is love, and that love emanates to everybody. So whether a person is considered to be a good person or a bad person or in between, I'm using human language here, of course, is that God loves all of us, and it is his desire that all of us will get to know him. So is there an option for inclusive concept of God? If by that you mean that does God want everybody to recognize, one, who he is, two, that there can be saved in his kingdom, and three, that the way for that to be accomplished is through this Christ, I would say yes, if those are your questions that you're asking. And of course, we know that God said to Abraham, in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. So that is the will of God, that everybody everywhere, from the first created person on this earth to the last that will be born on this earth before he comes again, it is his desire and his wish that all of us will get to know him. And so we can have this, obviously we have this concept of a God who is the creator God and therefore is responsible for all of us.
Right. And this takes me on to the question, another question, can anybody legitimize violence in the same way as justice and freedom?
To that question, I would say that, God is the one who has given us justice and freedom, and that we find justice and freedom again embedded in every society. There's no place for violence. Well, no, we've seen, in recent years or decades, how violence has swept through many countries and how devastating it has been. And we've seen how, we've got examples of wars and happening in all sorts of countries. In fact, even today, if you should count how many wars or civil wars are happening in this world, we'll be amazed as to how many of them are going on. But it is not God's wish that there should be violence in this world. But there is violence in this world, and God will put an end to this. So we can't say, well, because we have justice and got freedom, then violence is something that can be acceptable in any shape or form. I'm saying that no, it cannot be. However, let's not tie that into the question of how God acts in the past in history and how will act in the future. We are his creatures, his creation. We cannot judge him. What we need to do is to look at the context in which he's acted in the past, and then we can come to some realization as to why he's acted in those particular kinds of ways. But indeed, I don't think there's any place for violence in any shape or form.
Now, we have a lot of questions being asked around the world. Where's God? Why God? We have all the questions being asked and many people asking. And do you think that our understanding of death is one of the major problems as to why we cannot understand God's love? Because it's going back to that same question again. If God is so loving, compassionate, and slow to anger.
Right, yeah. Okay, I hear you on that one. I think, let me ask if I can try to answer that in this way.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, let me say that it was never the will of God that anybody should die.
Mm-hmm.
But nevertheless, death is a part of our lives. We're born at some point in time, and then at some point in time we will die. Not the will of God. God's will was that we should live forever. But the problem of sin, of death rather, when somebody dies, that has consequences, of course, to the loved ones of those people, in that they mourn, they're saddened. And all of us, I'm sure, has had the experience whereby we lose a loved one and we become saddened about the passing of that person. And some people will grieve for quite some time. Of course, the grieving process is different for different people. But the thing is this, depending on our concept of what death entails, in terms of what happens afterwards, I should say, then that could be a comforting thing, or it could well be something that puts people off from God. Now, let me explain. If we believe that a good person, when he dies, okay, it will be right, everything will be fine for him in the world to come. Now, we're not saying that someone who dies and they drift off to heaven or something like that. No, that is not biblical. What I'm saying is that if we have the perception that when somebody dies, if he's not a good person, shall we say, he goes to a place where he's punished, as in purgatory, and then goes to heaven, then I can see that could be hard for somebody to cope with. My loved one has died. Where is he? Where is she? Is she or he in a place where they're being punished? How can the gods of love, for example, cause someone who has sinned, who were to be in a place called hell and burn for all eternity? Now, this concept of what happens after death is something that has really actually turned people off God. But those are not biblical concepts. You know, we search the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, we'll not find anywhere where we're told that, you know, God punishes the wicked in hell. God puts people in purgatory to purify them so they go to heaven. What the Bible just tells us, however, is that, okay, so the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is everlasting life through his Son, Jesus Christ. So going back to your question again, do you think that our understanding of death is one of the major problems as to why we cannot understand God's love? I say we can understand God's love, not completely, not fully, because of who he is and what his love entails, but God has given us enough knowledge to understand who he is and what his desires are for us, and therefore we can make an intelligent decision to accept him in our lives. But I do agree with you that the problem that confronts certain individual when their loved one dies, or the perception of what would happen to them, has been something through the ages which have turned people off God. In other words, going back to the question, how can a loving God behave like that? So the misnomers, some of the misnomers that we find, which have been promulgated out there, has caused some people to turn away from God.
Now, we have 5 minutes to go, and this is where I'm going to turn my attention to the chat. We have roughly a question here. Can you describe God without paraphrasing from the Bible?
Can you describe God without paraphrasing from the Bible? Okay. My concept of God is based also on my personal experience with God. So I guess the question really is, why do I believe that? What is my, if you ask me to put in a word or in a sentence what God means to me, what would I say? I would say that in my personal experience, I experience God to be a God of love, a friend. Someone is always there for me. Someone, as it were, to use a phrase, who's got my back. Someone I can turn to in my times of need. Someone I delight to worship, to talk to as a good friend.
Right, and I think there's a second one here. Is it possible to describe him in a language that someone who hasn't read the Bible, and the person says that this is a Christian I am challenged with a lot?
Is it possible, can you repeat that please? Is it possible to
describe him in a language that someone who hasn't read the Bible?
Is it possible to describe God in a language that someone who have not read the Bible would understand?
Yes, I think that is probably linked to the first question also. Can you describe, without paraphrasing from the Bible, is it possible to describe him in a language that someone who hasn't read the Bible?
Okay, so let me share this concept with you then. As you said earlier, and I have 3 children. Well, they're adults now. And so my relationship with my children has been that, being their father, I have their best interest at heart. I guide them, obviously, my wife and I, we guide them through the obstacles in life. We seek to do what we believe to be the best for them. We are the parents, and therefore we have this love, this passion for them, wanting them to succeed, wanting them to do wanting to achieve the potential. And I would say this is what God has in mind for all of us. So in those terminologies, I would describe God as a father to us, as a friend.
I do hope that the person who would have asked that question is they would have received the answers that they were looking for. Sadly, Neville, it brought us to the end of our session tonight, and it was a pleasure sharing this with you. And please, if you those who are listen to us on Zoom, who's here with us on Zoom and also on YouTube, if you have any question, please don't be afraid to share them, and I'm sure one of the team members will get back to you, will answer those questions. So thank you again, and again, Neville, and as I said, it was a pleasure sharing this platform with you. Back over to Leroy at this moment.
Okay, thank you, Von. And that brings us to the end of another PAC programme. And I'd like to thank all of our presenters for their contributions this evening. Now, tomorrow is the last Total Transformation Seminar, and you have a special invitation to join us. The programme will run a bit differently tomorrow, as our health section will have a panel of 3 medical professionals and 1 natural health practitioner ready to answer your questions. So if you have any questions that are health related, please place them on the website. That's totaltransformationseminar.org. You can also text your questions to Juliet, and her number should be on the chat. What's the impact of a positive outlook on life? The mental health section tomorrow will address this issue. And for our final philosophical question, is the world a better place now than it was centuries ago? So lots to think about. And again, you're invited to join us for the last programme in this series. So thank you for listening, and good night.